Hello,
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Just trying to make sure that I'm in the right spot.
Yeah, Tuesday night link. Here it is. I probably needed to send it out to everybody, but I think everybody's joining in now.
I had
Okay.
the link. I just wanted to make sure I was on the right day.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know if I'm 2 or 4.
Thought she was.
Well, right here, let's see.
I'm pretty sure I'm 4, but
It's pretty easy. Let's see right here. Uh, Right here it is. Tuesday night class link for Tuesdays and teams 5 through 8. Uh, right here. So there we go. Uh,
so I am in 8. So that means I'm in 4, correct?
Yep,
C4.
you're in the right place.
Okay.
C2.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Section C2 Wednesday nights. C4.
I really thought it was tomorrow. So I was like, oh my goodness. Supposed to be in there tonight.
Okay, let's see what that looks like now. Yep, that looks pretty good.
Looks good, yeah.
Everybody knows where they're supposed to be Wednesday night. That's the Wednesday night group. That's the Tuesday night group. All righty. Well, I see it's time, so we're going to get started. Let me stop my share.
I have another question before we get started,
All
okay?
right.
Everybody's not here yet. I don't see any dates as far as assignment due dates.
Yep, they're there.
Where?
Let me show you. Let me share my screen.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. That's the first thing we cover every week. First thing we cover every week, we start with the weekly schedule with the assignment dates.
I saw the weekly schedule, but did I see a assignment date on there?
Yep. No, that's the wrong one. Right here it is, right here. So post draft of OMA at the end of week 3.
So like for the discussion board questions though.
They're due every Sunday. They're weekly, every Sunday at 9 o'clock. That's the same.
Okay, nope, I didn't know that. Okay.
Everything in Mels is due. Every weekly assignment's due Sunday night at 9.
Sunday night and 9.
Sunday night
I
at
must have
9.
missed that.
Yeah, discussion boards. Sunday
When
night
would
at 9.
so would a peer review be the next, like how would same time? Okay.
Same thing. We try to make everything the same all the way through. Sunday night at 9, at the end of the week. So
Well,
last week's discussion board was due this past Sunday at 9. This week's will be this Sunday at 9.
Can we still turn it in? Or no?
Still turn it in.
This that discussion board if I didn't turn it in.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I don't
so
do late, but
do,
it's good to try to stay on. This is a pacing guide for you. But if you don't get it in, just get it in.
Yeah, I'll
the
turn it in Sundays from now on, but I just wasn't sure. I was
Yep.
like, I guess I just need it by Wednesday because I thought we were coming in by Wednesday.
Just try to, just like I'll introduce tonight's, try to have it by Sunday night.
Yeah.
If you don't, you'll catch up. I mean, that's part of Pacing yourself. I just said this is your pacing guide, but everything, weekly discussions are due on Sunday night. And that's a good place to start because we start with this every week. So you should be working on your draft of OMA Task 1. I've already covered that. Materials are under last week's session if you need a refresher on what that needs to be. And so last week's assignment was locate copies of your school's crisis and emergency plans, read chapter 1. Now, I don't cover the reading. That's up to you. Now, I got several questions about, well, how long should it be? Or what was there? There's no rubric. You just answer the prompt. And you spend as much time as you think that you can spare on that. The important part's not the writing it up. It's doing it, finding out, researching, talking to people. This is the doing. This is an operational course. I won't ever tell you how many pages it's got to be or how many sentences or paragraphs. Just answer the question. And that's what we start every week with. We review this, we go over that, and I will talk about what you should have learned from having done this. And then I'll do the shout outs for the people that wrote things in their responses that caught my eye. All right. So the standard response to this is that I'll put back for each one of you that did a discussion board is, emergency and crisis plans are only effective if they are updated regularly, are correct, have been practiced. When the alarm sound is not the time to think about, have I updated the plan? Does everybody know what the plan is? Has it been communicated effectively? Does it still work? Do we still have the same people? So you've got to stay up with your discussion, with your plans and activities. Now, one of the questions I get, and it's under tonight's materials under week 2, is what is a crisis box? What's it supposed to look like? And right here, it tells you what it's supposed to be in that box. I've got a handout for you here. I've got a PowerPoint that tells you what should be in there. I get all kinds of responses to this one. Everything from, boy, we're really on the ball. We plan, we practice, we prepare, we update weekly, to we can't find it. Not our, one of them this time is we're in South Carolina. We don't have to do that. Yes, you do. It's the same in North and South Carolina. And so to that end, in North Carolina, they're called general statutes. 115C 288 is duties and powers of the principal. I like to use North Carolina's as the example because it puts everything in one place for you. And so right here is when it tells you conduct fire drills and inspect for fire hazards. It says you have to do a fire drill once a month, and every other week you have to do a safety inspection. It's not Dale's opinion, and you got to document it. It says inspect the buildings in charge at least twice a month. The inspection includes cafeterias, gyms, boiler rooms, storage rooms, auditoriums, stage areas. Keep the buildings safe from accumulation of trash and other fire hazards. You have to file a written copy of the report. You can't just say, yeah, I did that. If your district doesn't have a form to do your safety inspection, then I've got one for you. Again, it's under tonight's week 2 link, and it looks like this because it covers each of the areas that's just been outlined. It covers your traffic areas, your bus drop off and loading. Now, you know that one of your later activities this semester on discussion board is to do one of these using this form on your school and see how well you did. But, your cars, your vehicular traffic, all that stuff's important. It will end your career if you get a kid run over. It's just that point. And you know how parents are. They'll dip into the bus line because they don't want to wait in the car line and drop kids off nowadays. Get a kid run over and see how it goes for your career, even though if it's just a stupid parent that does that. I don't know why every parent in the world thinks that their child is too good to ride the school bus anymore. But every parent brings their kids to school. I've never seen elementary schools. Most of them were not designed to have that many cars on the campus. They assumed that there would be buses. So you got to separate the cars and buses some way. I tell them uptown ladies in my Lake Norman neighborhood, I don't know how in the world you expect your kids to learn about sex if you don't let them ride the school bus, but they don't. And so, but that's got to be a major issue for you. And if I had something where the district wasn't helping me and cars and buses and kids were all together, I'd put it on my safety report every 2 weeks. I would document that we've got a problem here. Y'all need to do something about this. If you got cars and kids and buses all in the same space, they don't coexist well. Somebody will get run over. So that's your first area. Then your surveillance, or do your cameras work? Well, we'll get to you. People over in the IT department, my camera's not working. We'll get out there. I'd have that on my safety report every 2 weeks if my cameras were all working 100% every day. Access, your doors. Told you, Uvalde, Texas, the latest big school shooting. They propped the door open and got in and went to a classroom with the door knob was locked. It was broken. Couldn't lock the room. Went in and killed all the kids in the room, 27 kids. Again, I would make sure that not only would I document it, I would call the person in charge and send them a follow-up email to make sure that, the maintenance guy, this is something that needs to be fixed today, not after a while or tomorrow. It needs to be fixed today. All your entrances, safety devices, equipment, two-way communication, exterior doors are in good working condition. If you're in an old building that still has lockers, that you've found a way to secure all those so kids can't hide contraband in them. All of these kinds of games. Again, it told you all your storage areas, your chemical storage, your janitor's closets, all that stuff is everything, are chemicals stored on the floor? They're supposed to be on the shelf. Are you paying attention to your custodians? One of the biggest problems I got into with this one was when I was supervising schools in Charlotte. One of the high schools, the custodians got some of those old panels that you partition the class off with, put them in the back of the cafeteria. Nobody was paying attention. They put all their chemicals back there, just out in the open, so they wouldn't have to go to the closet and get them. They were too lazy to go get them. And they had chemicals in the cafeteria, hazardous chemicals, without any locks, any protection in the cafeteria. That one cost us a pretty penny when that got discovered. You got to be paying attention to stuff like that. All of those things. Fire evacuation routes, making sure that you check the tags on your fire extinguishers. Yeah, there's somebody from the maintenance department supposed to do that, but what if they don't get around to it? What if they've got employee turnover and nobody bothered to check on yours? Who's going to ultimately be responsible if there's a fire and they go get the fire extinguisher and it doesn't work? That'd be you. You can't trust other people. Make sure there's nothing in front of doors, no doors propped open, nothing in the hallway, all these things. So that's all the stuff that you got to check every 2 weeks. And again, if I had something that was out of order, I would call the person involved with the district and I would send them a follow-up email. I wouldn't just put it on the report and file the report away and assume that they would see it. That's a big part of your safety in terms of your I showed you that one. I'll have to go back and open that one back up. In terms of your crisis kit, if it wasn't complete, if I was the AP in charge of it, and that'd be one of your jobs when you get your first AP job, I'd make sure that kit was up to date. Everything was in there that was supposed to be. Now, so that's this week's. They got to be practiced. They've got to be correct. They've got to be practiced. They got to be up to date. Everybody's got to be, and they got to be communicated well. Practice, up to date, and communication. Those are the three keys. And that's my standard response. Now, the things that caught my eye from this week's responses, and some of you will be here tonight, and some of you won't. Sean talked about a defibrillator. That's standard policy now, that those are a lot of schools and districts are buying defibrillators. You better know where it is. You better make sure it's working. It's charged up. Those things have to plug in and charge. It won't go well if they spend all that money and training and got one and you didn't keep it plugged up and the battery run down on it. So if you got one on your campus, you ought to know you got one and you need to make sure that it's routinely maintained. So that's a good point as well. Now, I am old. I freely acknowledge that, but I'm pretty good with technology. I've got a Droid right there. I've got 3 emails on it. I do technology training, as you know, for the beginners. I'm, TaskStream, Blackboard. I did a big data project for CMS 14 years ago before I retired, did the dashboard. I'm pretty technology literate. And I said that not to be boastful, but to say this. If I was going to attack a school in any way, in a bad intent, first thing I do is I disable your technology. Well, what does that got to do with what we're talking about tonight, Dale? All of your plans should be hard copy, not just on your phones. Let me say that again. All these plans need to be hard copy. There needs to be a crisis box with hard copies in it of all these things, of all your rosters. Oh, we shared our plans through Google Docs. First thing I do is I disable you. I would disable your technology, and then everybody be blind. Everybody be running around wondering what to do. All of your plans, everything safety related, needs to have a backup hard copy. Let me say that again, because when you go to court and you don't have one, you will lose. I can assure you. You can't go to court and say, well, my phone wasn't working. Don't know what happened, or they attacked and they hacked our first thing I'd do if I went to a school, I'd cut the T100 line. That's the first thing I'd do. No internet for anybody. Boom, you're out, you're gone. Most everybody's phones get jammed inside the building anyway. Try to keep people from using them during class time. And all I got to do is cut your internet source and you're blind. Everything needs to be hard copy. One of the things that Sean pointed out as well is if you've got renewals of different kinds, safety certificates, renewals, first responder, chemical update, make sure that everybody, you keep those in one place, hard copy, and make sure everybody keeps all their certifications up to date. Caroline talked about no excuses. I like that one. There ain't any excuses. You are responsible as a principal. Jeffrey talked about training. I like that one, but not just training for the problem that we get into training is we only do the teachers. We only do staff development for teachers. What about all of these paraprofessionals? Do we train the teacher assistants? No, that we can't keep them after hours because they can only work 37 and a half hours. How many times are teacher assistants left in charge of classrooms during the day? A lot. Got to train them too. What about your custodians? What about all your specials that might be itinerants, like the PE teacher from, that's at 2 or 3? Do you train them as well? Do you have them come back for your PD? You better make sure that everybody that's in your building, and with the staff turnover now, you better do it more than just once a year in August. You better do it at least twice a year to keep up with all those people. Elizabeth talked about out of date materials. Yeah, that's a problem. Again, it goes back to everything needs to be updated once a week on your class lists and rosters. Need to practice. Doesn't do any good to have these plans. She pointed, I've had students point out, yeah, we have all these plans. We've never practiced them once. It won't go well when something does happen. Tremaine talked about making sure you've got a list in that box of your district personnel contacts. That's a good idea. Make sure the people outside of your building that you need to be in touch with, you need to have that list inside your crisis box. Letitia talked about classroom bags. Again, hard copies. Love it. Love the idea of hard copies. That's a really good one. Tamla talked about maps and shutoffs. Yep, that's part of that crisis box as well. Right there it says maps and locations of your shutoffs. That's a good thing to have. Kristen talked about continuously updating. Need to do your update of your crisis box every week, every Monday. The person that ought to be doing that, your data manager, running those rosters, updating that thing every Monday. Wanda talked about got to have a system. You got to have a regular practice. That's a good idea. Randy talked about there's you have jurisdictional hierarchies, non-negotiables. I mean, this person's in charge of this. This person's in charge of that. And also to remember that law is hierarchical. Federal law, Trump state law, local policy, that kind of thing. Make sure that you understand that some of these laws are federal. Somebody at the local can't just say, well, we don't do that in our district. Yes, you do. If it's federal and state law, yes, you do. Nobody can give you permission to break the law. You got to understand that when there's federal and state law involved, locals, just because they don't want to or don't want to pay for it, that won't cut it when you go to court. Brandon talked about making sure that your terminology aligns. I like that one. You know, that we know that when we talk about evacuation plan 1, that's the same for everybody versus evacuation plan 2 or evacuation plan 3. Evacuation plan 1 generally is somewhere on your own campus, like going out to the ball field. 2 is where you can walk nearby. 3 is you get bused to. Make sure everybody is on the same page. Joshua talked about hard copies. Amy talked about discrepancies in plans because some of them are updated and some of them aren't. Making sure that our non-certified and subs are up to date. Melody talked about, there's supposed to be a black box. That's the crisis box. It's on the screen right now. It's supposed to be under the counter at your reception desk where everybody knows where it is. Adam, discrepancy. Glenda talked about complacency. Yeah, we update them once a year and don't ever practice. Alicia talked about the hierarchy of law. So did Jasmine. Liz talked about staff turnover impacts us negatively. Danya was talking about, this stuff's got to be available. It isn't any good if it isn't available. We don't make it available. And I guess the last thing that say is everybody did a good job, but these are things that caught my eye. But the final one is Tanya pointed out that laws and policies are fluid. They change. Every time you get a new assistant superintendent for that or executive director, or everybody always thinks their ideas are better. And one of the things that you have to keep up with is what's going on in your district. It's up to you. Don't assume that somebody else will take the responsibility to make sure that everything is in place safety-wise at your school. They won't. That's why they hired you. I hate that this has to be primal. It has to be the first thing we talk about, but in today's world, it does. That's where it is. All right. So I'm not going to go through these. South Carolina, as I said, organizes their laws differently than North Carolina. Title 59 is education law in South Carolina, and here's all the different topics. In North Carolina, let me go back. It keeps timing out on me. Let me go back here and go back to North Carolina. North Carolina does, instead of titles, does general statute. 115C, that's the education one. 115C, elementary and secondary education. Now, what I like about the way North Carolina does the same thing, they have all these different ones, but they've got one collective one that I really love in North Carolina, and that's the one we're going to. Now, these same laws exist in South Carolina. It's just not organized as cleanly as it is in North Carolina. South Carolina, they're just scattered throughout everywhere. The beauty of North Carolina is a few years back, they did one called Duties and Powers of the Principal, where they put all the random laws from different sections of education. Everything that you're responsible for as a principal is in this one law. 115C 288. That's why we go over it. You say, well, what about South Carolina? South Carolina has the same thing, but they're just in random places and all those different titles. So anything you see here it applies to South Carolina as well. I don't want to have to explain that every time we get together. Everything that you see in 115C 288, same law exists on the books in South Carolina. It's just not organized in one handy dandy area for principals like it is in North Carolina. So here we go. This is school law. This is what you're responsible for as a school principal. The first one is to grade and classify pupils. Biggest mistake that principal candidates must make is they think that teachers assign grades. They do not. You assign grade as a principal. Our first case study is going to be about a teacher failing a kid, assigning a failing grade illegally. What are you going to do as a principal? We'll talk about that one more probably. Next week, we'll talk about that in depth. But understanding you are the one who eventually says what final grade a kid gets in a class and whether they pass or fail or not the teacher. That responsibility rests solely with you. Now, one of the things that I get when we do the case study is, well, why didn't the superintendent tell him what to do? Superintendent can't. It's against the law. Because who says, the law says who grades and classifies pupils. Now, the superintendent knows not to tell you anything different than this because they would be breaking the law. So understand when we do our first case study that this is a teacher problem. It's not a grading problem. It's not a superintendent problem. The principal did nothing wrong, followed the law, contacted the superintendent as was required to do. And we're going to see that law in just a minute. The first case study is a teacher problem. A teacher went rogue. Teacher can't do what they did. So but we got to understand the principal has the authority and the responsibility to grade and classify pupils. Second one is to make accurate reports to the superintendent and the local board. In the case of the first case study, when the teacher went rogue on them, he was supposed to contact the superintendent. Now, that didn't mean the superintendent was supposed to say, you do this, do that, or the other. The superintendent told him, make sure you understand the facts of the case and be careful with this one. That's all the superintendent can advise. The superintendent can't say assign this or don't assign that. But you are to make accurate reports to the superintendent and the local board. And you have certain things that you have to report. To improve instruction and community spirit, you are supposed to supervise your teachers, evaluate your teachers, and put them on plans for professional growth and development. That what y'all did last semester in the APTEL, we taught you how to do that. You can see where you're legally required to do that. All right, conduct fire drills and inspect for fire hazards. That's the first thing we covered in this one, is how to do and make sure that you've got your emergency plans, your crisis box, you're doing your twice monthly assessment inventories of your facilities. And it tells you, and it can't just be making sure you've got a plan. Cafeterias, gyms, boiler rooms, storage rooms, auditoriums, and stage areas, as well as all classrooms. Everything inside and out your building, you have to do a safety inspection. Have to do a written report of it twice a month. To discipline students and assign duties to teachers in regard to discipline, due process. We'll talk about that more in depth. To protect school property, you're supposed to not let people tear it up. You're supposed to keep it clean. You're supposed to eliminate graffiti. You're supposed to be putting in maintenance request orders to make sure that things are fixed up. All right, now, to report certain acts to law enforcement and the superintendent. Now, let's look at that one versus the first one that we looked at. This is a very, very important point. To make accurate reports to the superintendent and local board. That's things like a teacher going rogue. That's like a teacher assigning failing a kid illegally. That's like, something happening at your campus. A kid got in trouble, or a parent caused a problem, or you've got something going on in your building that they need to be aware of. That's what that one's for. You notice the order here. This one says you have to call the superintendent too, but the superintendent is second. The superintendent is second. Who is first? Is that just random? Is that insignificant, or does that matter? Does it matter which order? I mean, does it matter that which one of those you do first? When I was a deputy superintendent and I was the person in charge and had to take those calls, the first thing I would ask when somebody called me, if it was a violation of the law that they were calling me about, have you called the police? Well, no, I'm calling. Don't call me. Hang up and call the police. It's very important. What do we not want to be seen doing? Covering up, hiding, handling it in-house, which means cover up. It says if these things happen on your campus, an act of crime or violence, there's 16 of them. You see them right there in front of you. Those are the acts of violence. Your first call is to the police, not to the central office of the superintendent. Your first call, that's very important. You are, especially in sexual incidences, you are not qualified to do a sexual investigation. If you start an investigation and find out it's sexual or that there was a physical part of it, then you go to the police, they will throw you under the bus. Can't help you. You contaminated our investigation. So the first thing you better do, if you've got a resource officer, when you know a violation of the law has occurred, you consult with them first. You want me to handle it? Or you're going to handle it. Now, if you want me to, I gave you first dibs, and then I'm going to call the superintendent. My second call is going to be the superintendent's office. Very important to understand that there's an order here. When that teacher illegally failed a kid in the first case study, you got to call the superintendent first. When a kid brings a gun to school, you got to call the law first. That's how it works. It's very important. There's a sequence of events. And so you got to make sure that you get in touch with law enforcement. Now, I'm not saying call 911 so all the scanner idiots will pick it up and be over to your school and all the crazy parents. But you need to get in touch with law enforcement when a law has been broken. They're the first call, not the superintendent's office. To make available school budgets and school improvement plans. I can't. One of your functions this semester, is you got to run down your budget and your school improvement plan. If I had a nickel for every time I had a student say, "Well, I can't do that because my principal said we don't give those out." Yes, you do. It says so right here in the law. Those have to be made available to parents of children and any other interested person. They have to be available, and not we'll get back to you in a month or a week or a day. When somebody asks, you have to be able to hand them a copy immediately. It's the law. Your budget is a public document. So is your school improvement plan. So as a principal, you have to, your legal charge is to make available school budget and school improvement plans. Not, I'll get to it after a while, or send me an email and I'll try to get back to you, or I've got to ask somebody, or we don't give those out. None of those excuses exist. I expect it now. Questions? Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Liz. Liz, or you're muted. There you go.
I'll go. So what does that look like with the school budget? I think this has been kind of up in the air when I've brought this up to my principal for past, like I think it was the APTEL where it was teachers are involved with the management of the school budget, and we didn't really know what that looks like. So what should we be looking for?
That's a great question. And that's one of the things that you're going to do is you're going to read a chapter in your book, and it's going to define for you what a local school budget looks like. And when you go and find it, it should have four account streams on it. It should have your federal money from your federal programs. We talked about those last week. CTE, EC 504, McKinney-Vento, English as second language, career and technical education, Title I, those six. Now it may not have dollar figures, but if like Title I, it should have Title I money on there. That's public knowledge. Now, a lot of times they'll just have positions, a number of positions, and it won't tell what their salaries are. But you do know that salaries of public employees are a lot in the big towns. They publish them in the newspaper. So you can't say, well, it's confidential because somebody's salary's on there. Not in the public school. That's not confidential information. So we should have all your federal funds. That's your first stream on there. You should have your state funds, state allotment. Again, that's public information. Teacher salaries, how many teachers, how much money's coming from the state, and then how much is coming from the local, the local board of education, how much coming from the county commissioners through them. And then you should have your local school budget on there. Money that you raise and money that you develop, either through fundraising or athletics or booster clubs, all that should be on there. Now, let me say this, and I'm so glad you asked this, Liz. One of the mistakes that principals make is thinking, well, I can turn, that's one of our weekly assignments, I can turn fundraising over to the PTA and be out of my hair and I won't be responsible. You deserve to lose your job if you're that dumb. You can delegate the activity, but not the responsibility. If they abscond with the money or if they don't deliver whatever they sold, or if they overspend, you are responsible. They'll fire you for lack of maintaining fiscal control. If people are raising money in your name, you better make sure that they follow all the rules, and we're going to cover that later this semester, the local rules on accounting of those funds, just like you were doing it yourself. There is no delegating the responsibility to somebody else. So if you're doing a fundraiser, it has to be approved. That's got to be reflected in the local budget. So
Now, if a fundraiser is being put on, does the money have to already be identified for how it's being used?
absolutely has to be upfront what you're spending it for. I'll cover those financial laws for you in one of our later sessions. The district was, it's got to be approved to start with. You can't just be you can't just be outlawing fundraisers. You got to put in a request from the superintendent's office. It has to be approved, and when you do, you have to say exactly what you're going to spend the money for, and that has to be approved as well. That's exactly right. So it's got to have federal funds, state funds, local funds, and then funds that come that you raise yourself. Now you say, well, the Athletic Booster Club, they're doing this, that, and the other. They've got to account for their funds as well. It should be in that budget. If you're doing fundraisers of any kind, it should be in that budget. Now, one of the things that you've got to understand is on local monies coming from the Board of Education, it doesn't really come from the Board of Education. In North and South Carolina, school boards are unempowered. What does that mean, unempowered? It means they do not have taxing authority. They cannot levy taxes. So when the Board of Education in, let's say, Cumberland County in Fayetteville develops their budget every spring, where do they get the money to fund it? Can they tax the citizens themselves to do that? No, they cannot. They have to go hat in hand to the county commissioners and beg them to fund their budget. And what if they say no? Then it's no. Or if they don't like it, they say, reduce it 20%, bring it back. So understanding it is public money. It is taxpayer money. It came from the local county commissioners, the tax base in your county, property tax and commercial business taxes. That's where it came from. That's where the local school budget comes from. So every time you see one of these announcements where these politicians are spraining their shoulders, patting themselves on the back for they brought in some business and given them incentives to bring jobs to your community, that incentive money that they're giving those businesses, guess where that comes from? Straight out of your school budget. That's where it comes from. They are not your friend, using your school money to try to create jobs. And that's a fallacy that, oh, we'll create these jobs and it won't. It just means you get less money. We know that this incentivizing businesses to come, there is no makeup. There is no makeup on the school budget. It's just less money for schools. It never comes back. I'll use Rutherford County in North Carolina as an example. They got a Facebook plant. The town and the county spent $20 million buying an old mill, tore it down, improved the site for Facebook. They built a server farm. They got 12 employees. They all make minimum wage. That's what they got. They have no taxes in perpetuity, and they spent $20 million in incentive money. And they've got nothing. Now the county's bankrupt, and so is the town. Facebook didn't get to make billions of dollars by giving any of it away. So you got to understand that you got a federal budget for all your federal programs. Some of them have money, most of them just positions. You got state budget. Not very much state money comes in loose. It's all in salaries. Local money comes in money and a few salaries. And then where you really have your operating budget, where you have some money that you can write a check on, is the money that you raise at the local school level. But you have to account for every penny of it. Again, it doesn't matter who raises it, if it's the PTA, the booster club, it does not matter. You are responsible for the reporting of it, how it's spent, and the accounting to make sure that not a penny of it gets gone. Not one penny. You are the person responsible. All right, the next question. Let's see.
I already you answered it with
Okay, thank you. Continue. All right, all right. To make available school budgets and school improvement plans, to evaluate licensed employees and develop mandatory improvement plans, transfer student records, sign driving eligibility, to establish school improvement teams right here, that puts together the school improvement plan. Now, remembering that the school improvement team has teachers, if it's a secondary school, it has kids, has parents, has community members on that. Now, one of the things that when I work with Dr. Renita Griffin Jordan out of Durham, one of the things that she reminds students of on a regular basis, and I'll stop my share. One of the things that she reminds students of is you can use that school improvement team to take some of the heat off when you're talking about how you're going to divide up the money, the budget at your school, how you're going to spend your money. One of the things that, you know, everybody thinks that their department's the most important. But we're really supposed to be spending our local money, the money that we have control on, supporting that school improvement plan. So if it's math, we should be spending it on math. Remember your master schedule and your budget need to support that school improvement plan. And if you've got teachers on there that can go back and say, well, you know, we're supporting where we really need the help in math. That's where our scores are the worst. Then it deflects some of that, you know, it's unfair. You know, I despise adults who don't understand that fair is an early adolescent concept. For adults, the only fair that we have is a place to go in the fall of the year to ride the Ferris wheel and get a corn dog. There is no fair for adults. That's an early adolescent. I mean, sixth graders are that they are just enamored with the notion of everything has to be fair. That's not an adult concept. The money and the master schedule, your budget and your master schedule have to support the academic initiatives of your school, as expressed through your school improvement plan, which is your most pressing needs. And it helps when instead of the principal saying, I'm going to spend all the money on science this year because that's our most pressing need, when the school improvement team says, we decided this was our most pressing need. That's where we're going to spend our money. But the biggest problem that I see is with fundraising or with local budgets is with their own local budgets is principals don't realize that the same rules apply to local money as, you know, school money, as local money, state money, federal money. It's got to be a complete accounting of that money. Let me share my screen and we'll go back. So again, all of these same laws exist in South Carolina. They're not just in one handy dandy place. All right. And again, they are called titles, and you can open each one of these up and you can read about all of these, but they're all there. But you know, this is the laws that you need to be most aware of as a school principal. We've talked about the crisis box, North Carolina general statutes. Again, there's a little over 500 of them. 288 is the most relevant for us. I'm going to pull up a document here for us. I'll get to that one in a minute. Let me go here. I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. We'll talk about that here just in a minute. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Here we go. 12, 13, Again, I'm using North Carolina general statutes, but these same laws exist on the book in South Carolina. Get back to Liz's question here. All right, so here we go. I have this. We'll cover this in depth later in the semester. To make available budgets in school and print. These are the budget laws in North Carolina that I pulled out. Understanding that in North and South Carolina, we have flat grant funding. What that means is you get paid for the number of students that are in the state money comes based on monthly, based on how many students you have in attendance, not how many on the roll, average daily attendance. That's why you have to take power school attendance every day. You know how they're all in your business about that every day. Well, there's a reason why. Money comes to you. We use the modified accrual accounting system, both states, flat grant funding. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is they tell you before the year, you're going to get $8,000 per pupil this year. All right. So let's break that $8,000 down in state money. It does not come at the beginning of the year as a check for $8,000 per pupil. They divide it up into 10 monthly segments. You have to have money on hand as a school district to pay for the first month of school. If you spend it appropriately, they reimburse it at the end of the first month. That's why the first 20 days are so important about number of teachers and pupils and all that, and they have you out beating the bushes. They spend their money and they want it back. They want to make sure that all the kids are enrolled. Now, when they give it back, again, they don't give you $8,000 at the end of the first month or before school starts. At the end of the first month, they give you $800 per pupil minus absenteeism. So if your attendance rate was 95%, you only get $760 per kid. You don't get paid for the ones that didn't come. Average daily attendance is how you get paid. That's why we take attendance every day and do a district average. And that's they subtract the absenteeism and send it. Now, if you didn't spend the money correctly, they don't reimburse if you spend it on things you weren't supposed to, but you get your money back at the end of each month, and that gives you the money to run the next month. Now, one of the things that students always fall in trap is this notion, these charter schools are killing us. All the kids go over there, start of the year, they come back, and they got all the money. They didn't get all the money. They got the money for the days that they were there. And then when they're with you, you get the money for the days that they're with you. They don't give out all the money the first week of school. It comes in monthly chunks according to who's in your school. So that is not true that the charter school got all the money and then you got the kid and got no money. That is not true. That is not how that works. It comes once a month based on how many kids attended in your school. And if that kid was in attendance at your school that month, then you get paid for them. That's the way it works. That's the modified accrual accounting system and flat grant. We're going to have a case study. I'll get to you in 1 second, Liz. We're going to have a case study on this one, Leandro, that 30 years ago, the state of North Carolina's national case was sued to change that and make it a student-based formula where certain kids cost more to educate than others, that we varied the amount of money that we gave based on the wealth of the district we were giving it to. That the Leandro plaintiffs lost that case. Let me say that again. This is important when we do that case study. The Leandro plaintiffs did not win. We still have a flat grant formula. Still get the same amount in poor districts as wealthy districts in North and South Carolina. The Leandro plaintiffs did not win the case. We'll explore that one more. Liz, you have a question? Great.
Yes, so I was under the impression that a charter school opens and we lose students to them within the first 20 days, that we don't get that money back, that they get it. So you're saying that the school does get the money if the students re-enroll in our school, but we never see an increase in teachers, like our class enrollment just goes up, like the number of students per class. So is that money sitting at the district level or the school level? And where does that go?
You don't get enough to hire another teacher.
Okay.
It's only $800 a month minus attendance for every kid you get back. That will not pay $100,000 teacher salary.
Okay. And is that why North Carolina, that's where I am, has the rules about their school calendar being starting within a certain time and ending a certain time. Because if we deviate from that, then we're really off on who starts the year, who doesn't start the year, kids coming, going. Does that factor into that?
It does.
Okay.
It certainly does. But think about this. A beginning teacher costs $37,500, is that right? 37,500, and with benefits and all the other, it basically a new teacher costs you about $70,000. You would have to have 100 kids come back from charter school at one time to pay one teacher's salary. You'd have to have 100 come back to your school for you to gain a teacher. Now, when I've seen when charter schools closed or private schools closed and a bunch of kids come back, I have seen districts hire, schools get a teacher, but one or two or a half dozen or even a dozen, you're going to have 100 kids coming back in order to get another teacher to pay a $70,000 salary.
Is that the same for areas with increased growth in community and you're building homes and you have 100 kids enrolling in one school year? Does the school still get money and they could hire somebody?
If they get 100, takes about 100 kids. Yeah.
So we've done that. Does that money get tied up at the district level or the school level?
Well, what happens is it all goes to the district and it's allotted back down to the school. And what they do a lot of times is your school might be the one that actually got the enrollment increase that would get another teacher, but some other school may get that teacher. You're not guaranteed that until the next fall when they do the allotments again. If you can handle them without having overloads and get in trouble with the state, having, state law, we talked about last week, defines class size. And as long as you're not more than 10% over the limit, they're not going to even worry about you. But there may be another school somewhere that needs that so that they're not over the limit, even though you're the one who pulled the attendance. It's by district in terms of the allotment of teachers.
Okay, so the money can go back to the district instead of the individual.
It always goes back to the district, and then it's allotted from the district back to the school. It never comes directly to the school. It always goes to the district, and then they turn and allot it to the schools. And you get an allotment sheet as a principal every spring in terms of how many positions that you will get. On that allotment sheet, you'll have all three types of teachers. You'll have your federal allotment. This is what the feds are going to give you in terms of CTE teachers, Title I, whatever. It'll have your federal allotment of teachers, not the dollar figure. It'll have the number of positions. Then it'll have the number of state positions. Because of your enrollment, the state says you get this many librarians, this many assistant principals, this many classroom core teachers. And then the third thing it'll have is if you're in a district that's not just, poor or medium, if you're in a higher wealth district, you'll get an allotment sheet that has your local allotment of teachers. Sometimes some districts pay for additional teachers. They're wealthy enough, like Charlotte-Mecklenburg. They pay in order to reduce class sizes. Now, I ran a project in Burke County, which is a Western North Carolina poor county. I traded in all my teacher assistants and reduced class size in grades 1 through 3. I was the most hated man in the county, though, because, teacher assistants have a better lobby than teachers do. And they're all local. They're all patronage hires. There's some local politico's daughter or mother or sister-in-law or whatever, but I let all of them go. I kept them in kindergarten. But I let all of them go and reduce class size to 1 to 15. And we went from the last rated elementary school in the district we made it to the middle of the top. There was two halves, top 7, bottom 7. We were the number 14. When we moved to number 7 and got on the top half, all of a sudden got promoted. We were doing too good. But people hated me because, I fired their mother-in-law. Not my problem. You can see I'm still broke up about it 35 years later. All I cared about, what's my job as principal? Make a good number go up or a bad number go down. So we replicated the STAR project from Tennessee, did 1 to 15 in grades 1 through 3. And all of a sudden, it was a miracle. It was just like the water stain of the face of the baby Jesus on building in Italy. It was just a miracle. People far and wide came to see the miracle. Wasn't no miracle. We just had people teaching kids instead of babysitting kids. Here's a notion. If you want kids to learn more, teach them more. Kind of works that way. And so the notion here is the district will give some, will make some of those decisions, but it takes about 100 kids to get another teacher. Now that's during the year. Now for the state, for every 30 kids, you get another teacher. But I'm talking about from for kids coming back during the year, but that state money just increases the per pupil increase. Now the number, but now at the beginning of the year, you get one teacher for every 30 kids, but it doesn't work that way during the year. It's a different calculation. It takes about 100 kids to get another teacher during the year. That's all stuff you learn when you go to the central office. But at the end of the day, what's important is the charter school is not stealing your money. They might be stealing your kids, but they're not stealing your money. If you get the kids back, you get the money back right with them. But it takes 100 of them coming back to get another teacher. So it may squeeze you. But again, it's a competitive world out there. But that's a great question. But as you can see, there's all kind of laws. We're going to cover them in depth. And there's laws on how you handle the money, local laws on that. Let me share my screen and I'll go through that one right quick. This is a good thing to be talking about now. About, you got to account for the money. You got to turn it in every day. Can't keep it overnight. You have to do all those. So this is the state laws. And then your local, this is the ones from Charlotte Meck. You will have local board policy on how you handle money as well. Fundraising, the rules, it's got to be approved. It's got to be shown in your budget. What you spend it on has to, not only does the fundraising activity have to be approved, what you're spending it on has to be approved as well. This all has to be reflected in your budget. How you handle the money, it can't be left in the building overnight. You have to do a reconciliation like on ticket sellers for ball games, all these things right here. Non-compete, you can't be running businesses out of your school. The photography teacher can't be selling photographs. One of the things when I got to the high school, when I became a high school principal in Charlotte, one of my problems was we had, the carpentry teacher was building sheds and selling them. Well, the local shed manufacturer wasn't happy about that. The photography teacher was running, was taking pictures for Strawbridge and was developing pictures out of the lab. We were competing with local businesses. Can't do that. And the bigger issue for the photography is 6 years before I got there, Career and Technical Education dropped photography as one of their core subject areas. So they were using an English position to fund the photography position, the photography teacher. So we had 40 students in each of the 10th grade English classes because we were a teacher short. That had to stop that day. When you get your first principal job, or it doesn't matter how many times you get to be principal, within a day of you arriving on campus, you'll get a call from somebody at the central office. You don't know who. You better take it because you don't know who it is. But what they'll say is, I'd like to come by and let's go have lunch. And you're like, why in the world are you going to have lunch with me? But what they've got is what I call the book. The book is the illegal stuff that's going on that campus that has to stop today. It might have been going on for the last 10 or 12 years. Doesn't matter. But it has to stop that day. And again, you're going to be the most hated man in the community when you stop the beloved photography teacher, because he's going to tell everybody that you did it. He's not going to tell the part where his program was stopped by the federal government 6 years ago and they were stealing money from the state to pay him. He's not going to tell that part. But you're going to have to stop all the illegal stuff, like the teacher assistant coach that's driving the activity bus as his personal vehicle on the weekends. You're going to have to stop stuff like that. You're going to have to do a lot of these things. But again, nobody can give you permission to break the law. And they will have a number of things that you're doing. You'll have to stop that 9-period day that all the teachers love because they're not getting enough Carnegie units for graduation. You're going to have to do stuff like that. That's when schools and school districts make the correction for stuff that's got out of legal compliance, either federal law, state law, or both local board policy. When they change principles, you're the one that has to fix all that stuff. And so most of the time, if it's been a poorly run school, you don't get to go to the best school in the district. That's not how it works when you first time out. You're going to go to some slaughterhouse that nobody else wants to transfer into. And there's going to be a lot of legal problems there generally. And those would be the first thing that you have to fix first day. You have to tell that photography teacher that, you're going to have to teach English again. And your photography lab now is closed. You're going to have to tell the carpentry teacher that you can't build houses anymore and raise money. Build these little sheds. That's against the board policy, and we got too many complaints. You're going to have to make teachers start teaching back in the area again. You're going to have to do all these things. You're going to have to make them understand that they have to come to school during their planning period. They can't have first period planning, so they don't have to show up till 9 o'clock. You're not going to be a popular person because there's always a lot of legal and policy things wrong. There's a reason why these schools are not doing well. Is they're kind of outlaw places. They don't follow any of the rules. And again, nobody can give you permission to break the law. If you continue those things or don't fix them, then it won't go well for you. You'll lose your house. So understanding that everything on them but the money has got to be on the up and up. Every penny that comes through the door, whether it's federal, state, local, or school money, has to be budgeted, accounted for, and approved, and is open for inspection from any parent or interested party that comes walking in your front door. The school improvement plan is the same way. It's not a secret. They post your report card. Everybody knows which areas of your school are not doing well academically. That's not a secret. That's one of the things teachers say is, I want that school improvement plan. It points out that we're not doing good in reading, and I'm a reading teacher. It's already on the report card. It's public information. It's the way it goes. No secrets in this business. Life's hard, then you die. That's my advice. You got to be tough. You've got to understand. And again, I'll close with this one. I'll be redundant. There is no such thing as fair for adults. That's an early adolescent concept. We'll talk more about inequities in funding and flat grant when we do Leandro. Make sure that you get your case study group together and start reading that first case study. You got to do a little PowerPoint presentation. I've got some examples. I will talk to you most specifically about your case study next week, and we'll also talk about your discussion board activity, what you're supposed to do for it. Again, let me remind you, let me share my screen, your activity for next week. I can close that one. Is examine a school field trip policy. This is an extension of that safety liability thing that we start with. This is an extension of that. And again, but the correct answer is when that happens and you're the person in charge, who are we going to call first? Are we going to call the bus garage, or are we going to call 911? This is your first pop quiz. This is one of those things that happen that you don't call the school first or the bus garage or any of that. You call the law first. A violation of the law has occurred when it's a traffic accident. When somebody rear-ended a bus, you got to call the law. And we'll talk more about that in terms of what your response will be next week. I appreciate you being with me as always. Anybody have any questions before we end tonight? Thank you for playing along tonight. I love questions. I love to hear things from you. We have conversations every week, folks. I'm not going to read the work to you. You do your activities, you grown people. This is about me explaining law to you and you having questions, and we work through these kinds of things, and I share my experiences with you. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How does the money work with an alternative school where students leave at 45 days or
It's funded.
30 days?
It's funded at the beginning of the year for the year. It comes in a block grant, ALP, alternative school funding. Comes in a block grant from the state. It's state funding, by the way. Comes from the state. And whatever you got at the beginning of the year is what you have for the whole year. They just project it based on the size of your district. That's how much money you get. I started the first one in Burke County when I was in the central office there. You get a block grant from the state, and you get it every year, and that's what you get is a block grant. It doesn't work. Again, it's an alternative or a special school. It's not. It works differently. It works on a block grant. So if you take too many students, that's on the people letting them in. What I did was a formula in Burke County so that we wouldn't start the school with 100 and midway through the year have 400. No. If you want to send us, once you get to your capacity, if you want to send us more, you got to take some of these back, because that's all the money you have. It's not like you can go to the board and get more money. The alternative school there is no local money in alternative schools. It's state money. It's governor's crime bill money and all of that kind of stuff. It comes in a block grant. And if it's overcrowded and you don't have enough teachers, that's because somebody along the way couldn't say no at the local level. They didn't want to be the bad guy, and so they created an unsafe situation over at the alternative school by overcrowding it, because they couldn't tell principals no, that you can't just keep sending kids. That at some point you've got to MTSS and work these kids yourself. They're not somebody else's problem; they're your problem. The only thing that we ought to be putting kids in alternative schools for is if they're dangerous, not if they're just dumb or no account. And that's, and we know that that's the biggest reason why people want to put them in alternative schools. They're hard to deal with. They're not learning. We want them off our test scores. And so, but there has to be somebody at the central office that's in charge of that doesn't allow that to happen. And if that person is allowing that to happen, that's on them. And so again, I set up the first one that was ever in Burke County, College Street School, the old Morganton Junior High facility. And again, not loved, because I tell principals, you've got all your seats taken up. Either you need to start learning to deal with these kids yourself. And if you won't send one, then you need to take one back. Which one do you want to take back? Well, this ain't just going kids' way. That's not the point of alternative education, to throw kids away. You have to have that critical conversation. Y'all can kind of tell that I've not always been beloved in my career, but I don't work for the adults. I work for kids. Just like Gardner Webb, I work for y'all. Our job is to work for children. You need to be a champion for kids, not for the adults in the building. You need to be the champion for students. That's the best advice. The best advice I can give you about the school business is you need to be a champion for students, not for the adults. We don't run schools for the comfort and the ease of the adults. We run them for kids, to give them an opportunity to better themselves in the world. This is the only shot some of them are ever going to have, is education, folks. It's that important. Don't take that away from them by making adults' lives easier. That's not what we do. We're in it for kids. But Larry, I'd like to hear more about that alternative situation later. But that's self-inflicted dumbassery there. Nobody made it be that way. People chose for it to be that way. All right. I'll see you next Wednesday or next Tuesday. And y'all, if you're really feeling masochistic this week, you can drop in and hear me again tomorrow night. If not, I'll see you next Tuesday. I appreciate you. Thank you.